This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my streaming video service Nebula when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description. The 2000s brought about what many have called the golden age of television. The creation and subsequent popularity of dramas such as The Sopranos and Oz led to a variety of follow-ups, each with their own levels of acclaim. Works like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, True Detective, early Game of Thrones, The Leftovers, according to that one friend of yours that actually watched The Leftovers and really wants you to watch it too. Going beyond dramas, comedies like Arrested Development, Community, and BoJack Horseman garnered a lot of critical recognition and strong cult fan bases. This golden age has arguably persisted and benefited from the rise of streaming services, as there's now a plethora of unique and interesting content that goes beyond what we previously thought was capable from the television landscape, telling stories we never thought would be told. The past 2 decades or so have been a gradual shift from television content being seen as just something you throw on while eating dinner to an actual serious work of art. It really does feel like we've gone from TV dinners to a fine dining experience. But sometimes I don't want a fine dining experience. Sometimes I just want to eat potato chips, and ironically enough, there's no show that better encapsulates the potato chip experience than Kitchen Nightmares. Originally debuting in the UK in 2004, with its angrier and dumber American version debuting in 2007, Kitchen Nightmares has an extremely simple premise. Each episode, expert chef Gordon Ramsay visits a failing restaurant, tries to diagnose what the problem is, and then does what he can to fix it and leave it successful. He achieves this through a lot of yelling and swearing. It's formulaic and predictable, and it's, it's a reality show, and I adore it.
All of a sudden, we've just dropped the fucking standards!
I feel like everyone has that one reality show that they like despite knowing better, and Kitchen Nightmares is mine. I don't even know if it qualifies as a guilty pleasure or just a pleasure. It really is a potato chip. I eat it knowing I'm not getting any nutrients, but sometimes I just want a bit of salt and something to keep snacking on without having to worry about things. And God damn it, 2021 has kicked my ass, and I just really need some fucking potato chips. As a cooking or food-related program, Kitchen Nightmares is sort of bad. Granted, I'm a complete idiot who has no idea what food is, so a lot of it flies right over my head, and some things that might feel simple, like don't put cooked food next to raw food in the fridge, and I guess don't use canned oil spray on a steak, felt like grand revelations when I started watching. But I think in general this show, despite effectively being about food and the restaurant business, isn't really going to teach you much. It doesn't really go into a lot of the science behind preparing a meal, what differentiates a good or bad dish, or the management required for running a business. This is especially true of the dumber, angrier American version, which is the one I primarily watch, even though I know all the comments are going to tell me the UK one is better. But rather than approach it from the point of view of a food-related show, I prefer to look at Kitchen Nightmares as a great example of storytelling structure. And that might sound a bit strange at first, because reality television isn't necessarily known for telling exceptionally great stories or even telling stories at all. But by breaking down a basic Kitchen Nightmares episode, you can get a clear-cut and easy-to-understand demonstration of how a basic narrative is formed. A lot of reality network TV is like this, really. Any show that is made primarily for people to stumble upon and watch any episode of at random needs to follow a lot of basic storytelling conventions in order for people to feel fulfilled by what they just watched. So because of that, every episode, and occasional 2-part episode, of Kitchen Nightmares needs to feel as if it has a proper beginning, middle, and end. So how exactly does the show do that? Well, first let's start by breaking down the 3-act structure. Okay, so before I get too far into this, I just want to say that at this point I've taken about a dozen or so assorted writing classes, and I think all of them had slight variations on the 3-act structure, little differences here and there regarding what terms mean what goes where, things like that. I'm going to go with the one that I like best, that I learned in my favorite screenwriting class. Side note, my screenwriting teacher actually found my YouTube channel, and I don't know if he still watches it, but if he does, hi Thomas. But anyway, I figured I'd address the potential discrepancies now in case someone notices something different in what I'm saying versus what they've been taught. With that in mind, let's get going here. So as you may or may not know, the 3-act structure is called such because it divides a basic story into 3 acts. I know, mind-blowing. I'm going to use this nice little chart to demonstrate the structure because I feel like it's a good visual. So each episode of Kitchen Nightmares starts by establishing our status quo. This is where we learn who our primary characters are, what their day-to-day life is like, and what is their goal. This is a very, very important thing to establish because you want your audience to have a clear understanding of what exactly is going on and what looks like normalcy in this scenario. So, much like the beginning of Star Wars exploring exactly what the galaxy is like and who Luke Skywalker is as a person, Kitchen Nightmares needs to start off by establishing what this restaurant is like and who are the people running it. Generally, this is done by having talking head segments of the owners, chefs, and other employees going over what the restaurant is like and why it's not doing well, interspersed with footage of the restaurant operating, and usually usually some kind of interpersonal argument among staff members or disappointed customers or something going wrong with one of the dishes. And in one case, it's just the fact that they make food from Denmark. Which, fair, I mean, fuck Denmark. Once you've established your status quo, it's time to break it. Which, I mean, when you get down to it, is the point of Kitchen Nightmares. This leads us to our inciting incident. This is the thing that essentially disrupts the normal life of our protagonist and basically what kicks off the story. In this case, the inciting incident of every episode of Kitchen Nightmares is pretty simple. It's just the act of Gordon agreeing to cover the business on the show in the first place and then visiting the restaurant. Once Gordon is there, the owners of the restaurant usually give him a tour around the place and then they have him sample a bunch of the foods. This is by far the most popular segment of the show because this is where you get a lot of the best reactions from Ramsay and where you can usually expect some kind of what the fuck thing going on. Like this really greasy pizza with absurdly thick dough, this grilled lettuce salad, or my personal favorite, this restaurant in New Orleans that serves frozen shrimp. Like, come on dude, you're in fucking Monterey. You can walk 5 steps and find a market selling fresh shrimp, and there are like a million fucking seafood places on Veterans Boulevard alone, and I guarantee you a fair bit of them have fresh ingredients. Like, you have too much competition to use frozen goods and look bad in comparison to Don's fucking seafood. Anyway, this is where we end the first act with plot point 1. Plot point 1 means that the goal has been established and, in turn, accepted. In this case, now that Gordon has an idea of what the place is like and has sampled the dishes, he's committing to fixing the restaurant, which is our goal, and that goal is being accepted by our protagonist, in this case, the restaurant owners. Now we're on to Act 2, what could be considered the Confrontation Act. This is where we get to Gordon observing the restaurant during dinner service. This is where we get to see more in depth how everyone performs in action, with additional commentary from Ramsay highlighting what exactly everyone is doing wrong. In the 3-act structure, this would most likely be the midpoint. This is where we as the audience get new information regarding how the restaurant operates, and where we see Ramsay make progress on his goal of trying to help them. Though, admittedly, this progress is generally him noticing how bad they're fucking up. As the midpoint, though, it is also where the story shifts, because after this point, Ramsay will go from passive observer to active participant and assistant. This is where Gordon is going to start proposing his changes and adjustments and seeing what all he can do. All of this will lead to plot point 2, which is where things seem to be at their lowest point. It's a whole thing where at the end of Act 2, you want to show a serious struggle, make it seem like they might not be able to accomplish their goal after all. Of all the stages of a Kitchen Nightmares episode, this is the one that is the most flexible depending on the episode. Sometimes this could be a chef or important staff member leaving, sometimes this could be the owner being stubborn and refusing to adapt to any of the new changes, sometimes it's just like a fire. It's really anything that makes it seem like the restaurant may never recover from this point. This sad, depressing moment is what's going to lead us into Act 3, where ideally everything is going to wrap up. This is where we get to the climax. Climax as a word means a lot of things, and I don't just mean that way, but rather climax is a word I've seen a lot of debate over regarding what exactly it means to plot and where exactly it fits in the 3-act chart. Personally, I like to look at it like this. The climax occurs in Act 3, and it's the true moment of truth. Not necessarily the most intense moment per se, but the one where the challenge will determine whether or not the protagonists are going to achieve their goal. So Act 3 in a Kitchen Nightmares episode would generally involve Ramsay still working hard to turn the restaurant around and actually seeming to do so. This is where most of the substantial changes happen, whether that's completely renovating the interior of the restaurant, or changing the menu, or convincing the owner to stop being an asshole. The climax of this would be the grand reopening of the restaurant. This is where we see whether or not the changes amounted to any benefit, and whether or not the restaurant has improved and is capable of being competently run. And in most Kitchen Nightmares episodes, the answer is yes. They might run into a hitch here and there, but generally the end result is a successful night that gives positive vibes going forward. So then we have the resolution. We see Ramsay leave and maybe get a brief montage follow-up on how the restaurant and people involved have been doing since the episode was filmed, and then it's done. Congratulations, we just finished a whole 3-act narrative. And it's super cool, right? It's really interesting how every Kitchen Nightmares episode is like this, that they're able to help out restaurants while also somehow fitting into such a conventional, accepted narrative structure. How exactly do they do that? So at this point, it's basically common rhetoric that all reality TV is scripted, right? I mean, in a lot of cases, it seems like if you ever bring up enjoying or even just knowing about a certain reality TV show, there's always some personified Redditor waiting around the corner to tell you about how fake they all are and how they're all scripted and staged. And like, yeah, that is true. A lot of reality TV is like that. Though I feel like there's a general misunderstanding regarding what staged and scripted actually mean. Because I think when people hear scripted, their mind immediately goes to the most obvious interpretation of the word. Reality TV is composed by writers talking to actors and handing out lines of dialogue, and like, maybe this happens in some productions. Like, there's that really infamous Storage Wars line that was very clearly being fed to this guy.
Derrida.
What the is this?
Watch your profanity.
Right, I'm sorry.
But generally, scripting is a lot more subtle than that. Like, the amount of effort that it would take to stage a kitchen and find actors under the radar and deliver them lines to make it look like something is wrong would be way more than just finding a restaurant that's struggling and finding ways to work with it for your desired results. I can't say exactly how Kitchen Nightmares scripts or stages it shows. The fact of the matter is that the people who know that aren't going to say, either because it's in their best interest not to as a creative behind the show, or they're just not allowed to because of NDAs or whatever. There have been various reports from people over the years through various mediums, reports that I will say to take with a grain of salt because I cannot confirm it, so this is all alleged. I am not claiming to know any truth behind the production of Kitchen Nightmares. Please, for the love of God, do not send me legal threats, Gordon Ramsay. From what I can tell, the common consensus is that they don't really stage anything. An AMA from a production assistant on the show includes the quote, "Obviously they have a schedule and idea of what's going to happen, but the show makes itself. They don't make the restaurant shitty on purpose, they don't fabricate situations to be more dramatic, etc. The most they do is selective editing and post-production, but no, nothing is faked or staged live." Another Reddit user who attended the before taping of the Oceana episode, who also provided a signed receipt from the night as proof, said that from their experience, very little seemed staged. The crew set up cameras on the ceiling, and the only thing they asked the customers was that if they had to send any food back, they let the producers know so they could get footage of it. And in my opinion, that's less of a staging thing, and more like you just want to make sure that you get footage of things happening, but you can't focus on every single customer, so you need to know. However, there is a 2007 interview with a person who was on the show which gives a differing perspective. According to him, the show did employ a lot of manipulative tactics throughout the episode, for example, making it look like one of the employees walked out by using B-roll footage of a plumber's van leaving the scene and editing it to make it seem like it's him. Another thing this person said they did was deliberately overbook the dining room for the purpose of making the stakes more dramatic. And perhaps the most wild of the accusations, apparently the show's producers hired a chef to work there while they were filming, and then they got footage of him dropping a chicken wing on the ground and then putting it into the fryer. And they're not the only person to make such claims. Back in 2007, a former manager at a restaurant called Dylan sued Ramsay for various offenses, including staging dramatic events and hiring actors. The lawsuit didn't go through because the contract for the show says that any legal action has to be settled by arbitration. Once again, I'd like to say that I don't know what all of this is true, and you should take it all with a grain of salt. The ones defending the show seem to be anonymous, and the ones against the show seem to primarily be from those on the show who are upset by how they were portrayed, which is fair, but without any definitive proof one way or the other, it's essentially impossible to make a determination. Once again, please do not send me a legal threat, Gordon Ramsay. If there's any consistency to make out from this, it is the basics that are true for any program, really. The events of what happened are going to be shaped and manipulated by the presence of producers, crew, cameras, and the final state of editing. This isn't necessarily a bad thing because, like I said, this is true for even the most pure cinema verite of productions. Even if your project aims to be as much of a fly-on-the-wall thing as possible, it still is going to be impacted by the fact that people won't perform in front of cameras the same way they would without them, and that even the nature of what is going to be focused on and what is going to make the final cut and how it's going to be shown are all going to tamper with the objective nature of what is going on. It is a process of subjective selection. So when it comes to Kitchen Nightmares, let's look at it this way. You might think that it seems implausible for all of these restaurants to be going through these sorts of hardships, to be this mismanaged, to have this much drama, but an important thing to remember is that you don't just end up on Kitchen Nightmares. Restaurants would submit their own application, then presumably the producers do a vetting process to see if that restaurant is worthwhile. They're not going to choose a restaurant suffering mild issues made by people who just seem boring and conventional. Of course not. You're going to gravitate towards what would make the most compelling narrative and make the more exciting episode. It's sort of like making fandom drama videos. You're not going to choose just any old internet discourse, but the worst and most extreme cases of it because that's what you can actually make a full video out of. And that's not shade, that's just the reality of how it works. People making content want to prioritize the content that's going to be interesting, and Kitchen Nightmares is first and foremost content. And if you're a producer with a general concept of what you want the episode to be, the format it needs to fit into, you're going to do what you can to get that final result. That's not going to mean staging everything because you don't necessarily need to. If you want to portray how disgusted the customers are by the food, all you really need is to show footage of one customer complaining about it and sending their dish back. And if you want to portray the food as better, all you need is one clip of someone complimenting the dish. And while I can't confirm whether or not the thing about them editing in the plumber's van to make it look like a chef left is true, the idea of stitching together separate shots or conversations or reactions to form one scene is pretty standard in reality TV show editing. Sometimes it's not even done maliciously, but rather you just need B-roll to keep the scene going, so you cut to someone's reaction to something, even if it was from a completely different moment. There's also the intrinsic way stuff like this happens. Going back to what I said earlier about how the presence of cameras shape and alter the reality of what's happening, let's say you're an average Joe and you just found out that you're going to attend a taping of the show Kitchen Nightmares. The people who attend such a thing probably would be fans of the series and know about the format, and if you're aware that your actions are being recorded and you're aware that you're there to, say, see how the food is like before Ramsay's changes, then just the fact that you're aware that you're on a show to suit a certain role is going to affect the way that you view the experience. It would be basically impossible for it not to. And this isn't even going into Ramsay's role in it. Once again, for a third time, I make no claims regarding what Ramsay does or does not do. But one of the things that's pretty common in reports is the idea that Ramsay is a lot more heated and aggressive on camera than he is in real life, which, yeah, makes sense. And that also comes with an effect on how that shapes everyone else. You don't necessarily need to script out an argument to get someone to argue with you. But if someone starts yelling on camera about how bad you are, or how bad your restaurant is, or how bad your food is, then you're going to inevitably be baited into playing into a response. And much like how you act when you receive a Christmas gift, if he's showing you all of his renovations and things he's doing for you, there's going to be pressure to give a grateful response, regardless of any direct outside pushing from any of the crew members. Like, if someone completely redecorated my house for free and I was also having my reaction recorded on camera, I doubt that I would act upset there on film at that moment in time. And yeah, it's no surprise that there are people who have been on the show and later complained or reverted from the redecorations or improvements. Because if someone altered my house without my stay, I would probably make changes to it once they left. One of the main arguments used to prove that Kitchen Nightmares is fake, or at the very least isn't as helpful as it claims, is the large amounts of restaurants that have closed after being on the show. According to a 2018 article by Mashed, as well as the Kitchen Nightmares update site, only 15 of the 77 restaurants featured are still open. That is a super huge number, and it's common for people to see it and say that Kitchen Nightmares as a show doesn't actually work. And to that I say, yeah, Of course it doesn't. The reality of the situation is that Gordon Ramsay being there for a few days isn't going to magically fix anything wrong with the restaurants the same way that going to the gym once isn't going to suddenly make you healthy. A lot of the businesses featured on the show are suffering from complicated problems you can't just flip a switch on. Heavy competition, incompetent or stubborn owners, bad location, massive debt, bad PR, and even just the reality that a lot of the show was made in the recession era, which saw a lot of independent businesses close down and never reopen. The only way a show like this could be absolutely effective is if they revised it so that Ramsay stays there long term, like for an entire TV season, and sits down to work through all the issues slowly and make sure the chefs and owners are fully prepared and that they are doing good PR work and branding and fiscal management. And absolutely no one would watch that, and it is nowhere near as practical as Kitchen Nightmares' hit it and quit it model. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that no matter how staged Kitchen Nightmares is or isn't, a large amount of its format is going to inevitably lead into this direction. There's so many factors at play here, even without any complex scripting or manipulation, that will inevitably alter the situation into a desired formula in order to create a basic structure, and once that structure is created, the job is done. But there was at least one moment where Kitchen Nightmares broke its own narrative, and it is perhaps the most famous moment of the series. So the season finale of season 6 was supposed to be a normal episode. Ramsay goes to a restaurant in Arizona called Amy's Baking Company, run by the eponymous Amy and her strange former playboy husband, Sammy. The restaurant suffers from a lot of what you usually expect: stubborn owners, dissatisfied customers, large wait times for food, too big menu, and just complaints that none of the meals are really all that good. When you watch the episode for the first time, there are two things that stick out. For starters, the pacing is a lot slower. Scenes go on longer, conversations play out more, and you might notice that you're midway through the episode and yet still feel like you're only at the beginning of the story. The second thing you'll notice is that this episode is fucking bonkers, and that Amy and Sammy are not good people. They spend most of the time yelling at each other, yelling at their staff, yelling at customers, yelling at Ramsay. They're in a passionate denial about the state of their restaurant. They're in a war against Yelp reviewers. They pocket the tips that are supposed to be for their waiters. Amy fires a server just for asking a question. They've been through 100 employees in the span of a year. It is fucking batshit. And then after all of this, we get this bombshell of a moment.
I think you're too far gone.
Okay, then let's end the show. You think I'm too far gone? There's no hope. Yalla, yalla. It's Christmas. Let's go home.
Yeah, the episode just stops right there. At what would normally be the midpoint of the 3-act structure, instead the episode just stops. The first and only time that a Kitchen Nightmares episode ends with Ramsay walking out rather than finishing helping the restaurant. Amy's Baking Company is by far the most bombastic, surprising, intense, and sensational episode of the series. And what's really impressive about it is that in a lot of respects, it is also the most honest. Here you have a pair of restaurant owners who are refusing to participate in the narrative construction, who straight up refuse the call of action to change their ways and go along with what the show wants. It's the underlying issue of the show suddenly shoved right into your face. Ramsay is helping people and businesses so flawed that aren't going to be benefited by any assistance he can give. And what makes this even more telling is just how vocal Amy and Sammy were, not just in the episode, but in the aftermath of it. Once this episode went viral, people would go to their personal Facebook page or even go visit in person to see if they were really like that. And the answer was yes, they are. That wasn't the producers. Amy and Sammy simply behave in this manner in their day-to-day life. None of that was exaggerated. I think this is also interesting because of how it deviated from the norm and ended up being far and away the show's most popular episode. A lot of this is due to how the episode went viral. Perhaps this is just a matter of my perspective, but I distinctly recall this being the first episode of Kitchen Nightmares that got widely shared online. Memes were made, animations, everyone was trying their best to find clips of it on YouTube. Full uploads were taken down, but only after receiving millions of views. I don't have any of the stats for those original uploads, but to give a frame of reference for how in demand this episode is, an official upload put up 2 years ago, long after the episode originally aired, has 14 million views on YouTube. That's a lot, right? This sort of kickstarted what I think is an interesting phenomenon in the history of Kitchen Nightmares. The show did a follow-up episode on Amy's Baking Company for its Season 7 premiere, which was fine, not really all that interesting, but does feature a new interview and some unseen footage, as well as a discussion over what happened. Then the show would end later that year, and so that should be it, right? Reality TV show goes on for years, finishes, and maybe you see reruns every now and then while flipping through the TV. Except no, because now we have the official Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel, which exists to post official Kitchen Nightmares clips. This proved to be wildly popular, and as of now, the channel has over 5 million subscribers and a good amount of views on every video, which is impressive considering the channel, by its very nature, is nothing but re-uploads. It's provided a second life for the series, and you could make a compelling argument that Kitchen Nightmares is more popular today via its internet presence than it was when it was actually airing on Fox. And look, I love this channel, I watch the hell out of it. It's got some good shit, but it's also fascinating to look at within the narrative of the show. Because one thing you notice when looking at the channel is that besides the occasional full episode upload, basically everything here are the big dramatic moments. The times where Gordon eats gross food, the times where he discovers health hazards in the kitchen, the times where he argues with the restaurant owners, all with bombastic, over-the-top titles, or recently memes, which is bizarre to see. You'd be hard-pressed to find a clip here that focuses on any positive aspect of the show, like nothing about the renovation, or the owner's changing attitude, or the restaurant's success afterwards. And once again, yeah, I get this. When you're uploading content to YouTube, you want to focus on the things that are going to draw attention and that people are going to want to watch. And the reality is that it's more compelling to see Gordon react to being served a raw steak than it is to see a video titled, "Restaurant Operating Like Normal." But it's wild how this sort of breaks the format of what the show is going for, and once again sort of reveals its hand. Kitchen Nightmares sold itself as a show about repairing restaurants and businesses and turning them around into successes. It utilized the 3-act structure to create narratives around it and present the image of success and accomplishment. But now everything is presented outside of that structure, outside of that narrative. The only things that get spotlighted are the failures, the fuck-ups, and the faults. It's the equivalent of the Star Wars YouTube channel only uploading clips where Luke Skywalker gets his shit kicked in. And this does change the way one views the show. You may know in your head that the show is about helping restaurants, but if all you associate it with is the outrageous and terrible events, then that's going to cloud how you see the show as a whole. I mean, I know I'm guilty of it. The reason why Kitchen Nightmares became my go-to potato chip series is because I fell down the rabbit hole of looking for the most wild moments after the Amy's Baking Company episode came out. This online stuff actually did cause a bit of a stir, too. Back in 2018, Kitchen Nightmares faced a defamation lawsuit from the current owners of the New Orleans restaurant Oceana, who got mad after the UK Kitchen Nightmares page showed a clip from the Oceana episode showcasing Ramsay vomiting after opening a rotten container of shrimp and finding a dead mouse. The owners claimed that those two events were staged, which, look, I have no idea and I'm not going to comment on. But more importantly, they said that the clip, uploaded with the caption, "No wonder this restaurant is failing," presented an improper view of the business that could affect the restaurant itself, since Oceana was one of the few places to remain open after the series ended and had been a good 7 years since the original episode aired. Even if those moments weren't staged, they're not necessarily reflective of the restaurant as it is now under new ownership and with years and years of business. No matter how Oceana Grill actually is today, personally, I never heard anything good about it from my New Orleans friends. There is something to be said about the fact that they presumably went on the show to fix their business and improve, and no matter how effective that actually was, the legacy from now on is going to basically be virally performing clips about how gross and unpleasant the experience was. Nobody remembers how the Oceana episode ends. I couldn't even tell you, and I rewatched it for this video. But I can tell you at the time Gordon got sick, or the moment where the owner argued with Ramsay, and doesn't that just sort of go against what the show was trying to do? I started this video because I find narrative structure interesting. I mean, I spent a lot of money and a few years of my life studying it formally in school, so I guess I better find it interesting. But I thought it was fascinating to see how narrative structure can be formed and utilized even in something as simple as an episode of reality TV. We think of the 3-act structure so much in terms of blockbuster films or epic works of fiction that we often forget just how applicable it is and how it can impact the way that we see certain courses of events. We also just find the contrast between what Kitchen Nightmares as a show is trying to do and its internet afterlife to be incredibly fascinating. Reality TV has always been about spectacle at its heart, but in an age where you don't necessarily have to hit a certain allotted time slot, where you don't have to justify what you're doing beyond just saying, I want to focus on shitty food, and where outrage and negativity thrives, you can really see the show slim down to its roots and main appeal, the stuff guaranteed to generate the most clicks and play off our own inner bile fascinations. Any sort of narrative structure Kitchen Nightmares might have been trying to achieve is lost, and in its place is simply a bunch of isolated clips with meme titles. And that's saying something. So here's a fun fact. Did you know that you could have watched this video sooner? And completely free of ads? That seems pretty neat, huh? How do you do that, you may be wondering? Well, from now on, all of my future videos and my back catalog are on Nebula, a Streamy Award-nominated service built by content creators for content creators. Get to experience exclusive and ad-free content from some of your favorite online essayists, like Maggie Mayfish, Princess Weeks, Sarah Zed, and, of course, me. It's the best way to watch content from creators you know, as well as discover exciting and cool new ones. And thanks to a deal with CuriosityStream, if you go to curiositystream.com/LadyEmily, you can get an entire year of CuriosityStream and Nebula for just $14.79, a 26% discount. If you don't know, CuriosityStream is a streaming service focused on documentaries and nonfiction content. We've talked a lot about Kitchen Nightmares and restaurants and food in this video, but like I said, Kitchen Nightmares doesn't really talk all that much about food itself. If you find yourself interested in exploring that sort of thing, then I recommend checking out The History of Food, a multi-part documentary series all about, well, food. Not just how it's made, but how we've progressed in our understanding of it, and how we even just came up with the concept of cooking, something you probably never thought needed to be discovered before. You can watch The History of Food as well as thousands of other excellent documentaries on CuriosityStream. The best part is that so long as you have CuriosityStream, you'll also have access to Nebula. Once you use the code to sign up for CuriosityStream, you'll receive an email from Nebula granting you access. I can't recommend it enough, both as a creator who's grateful to have a platform where you don't have to worry about algorithms and content ID, but also as a viewer who loves finding new creators and stuff that teaches me as much as it entertains me. So go to curiositystream.com/LadyEmily to get a year of CuriosityStream and Nebula at a discount and enjoy the hours upon hours of content there is to choose from. As always, thanks for watching and thank you for the support. I'd like to go ahead and thank my patrons with a very special thanks to the following people whose names I hopefully won't screw up. Alice in the Middle, Anselm, Beacon Bug, Booth Taste, sorry Booth Taste, Booth Taste, Bulk, Clara M, Daisy Hind, Dan Connell, Dan Pierce, Dana, Dana Carrier, David Portnov, David Rose, Devin Jones, Doc Trancy, Dramatic Soprano, Elijah Siddiqui, Elisa O'Kee, Elliot Berry, Emma Kay, Executive Nerd, Gavin Daphne King, John Carlo, Jan the Final Girl, J. Marquez Durst, Jess, Jessica Lane, Jordan Tullis, Katrina Leonidikis, Kelsey Hoover, Kyle Edman, Kyle Slaby, Lily Sugarman, Lord Hornet, Madry Bread, Mason Barber, Matt Baker, Michelle, Michael Freytag, Mr. Bones, Myriad, Nazreen, Nathan Y, Nick Melandy, Nick Skahe, Not Horses, Orbital Hippie, Paige, Quithar, Romana Montegani, Richard Pryor, Rose Dale, Sabrina, Sam Wade, Samuel Snap, Sarah Lozano, Sarah Zed, Scarebank, Sean Lane, Sebastian Canino, Simon Welsh, Skylar Conlon, Sound Effects Madison, Spencer Neil Campbell, Spoop Nudie, Stephen Fan, The Independent Shadow, Scion to the Spider God, The Recognition Scene, Tim Delegati, Tobias Lutrine, Vivi Last Name, Woody Sims, York, and Zachary Brill. Once again, thank you so much for all the support. It does mean a lot to me. I know last post-credit I teased another video. That one is still going to be made. It's just a lot of shitload of fuck has happened since then. And I had to push it back a bit so I could make sure it was as good as it needs to be, and also to account for a lot that has happened with the subject. If you know, you know. So, no post-credit joke this time, just, thanks for watching the channel, and, for sticking by me in all this. And, it's just like, what the fuck place in Metairie uses frozen shrimp? What do you have, fucking crawfish mailed in as well? Are you fucking high?